Hey readers, it's Miss Jenny here to do Read Aloud today with you. I finally remembered to bring the book back home with me so we can actually read together today. So let's get started. We are reading Pax, and when we left off yesterday, we were in the middle of chapter 25 from Pax's point of view, and so that's where we will begin today. Just as a to recall from what we were doing yesterday or what we were talking about, Pax was kind of trying to learn how to hunt with Bristle, and he was now kind of crouched in front of a mouse hole trying to see if he could get his own mouse. So let's get started. His excitement made it hard to stay perfectly still, but at last a mouse came to the entrance and tested the air. Like Bristle's quarry, the mouse darted back in at the sight of the fox. Like Bristle's quarry, it re-emerged until it was convinced Pax was asleep and then made a run for it. Pax wasn't as quick as Bristle, but he managed to knock the mouse over, and as it scrambled to its feet, he swiped again and caught his first prey. It was a small meal, but each bite sent a hot current through Pax's body. The mouse's life now merged with his own. His muscles brimmed with energy. He sprang up and tore a joyful path around the clearing, running by Bristle in a blaze of red fur. She got to her feet to watch. Pax sped by again, scarcely skimming the ground, but it wasn't celebration enough. In the center of the clearing stood an old, crooked sweet gum tree. Its lowest limbs reached out over a hollow. Its upper branches glinted blue with feeding jays. Pax flew at the trunk. He scrambled easily onto the first low branch and balanced there. Then, step by cautious step, he began to walk along its length. Leaves rustled around him in welcome like fragrant green stars. Through them, he looked down in astonishment. The world had changed. From this vantage point, he could see through the ridge-lined trees to the encampment and the river in the distance. The meadow grasses, which just a moment ago had brushed his shoulders, now seemed flattened to a broad green bowl. Jays flew down to scold him. Pax recalled Runt's flight. He coiled himself, then sprang, stretching out and out, feeling the air ruffle his belly fur. He landed lightly and threw his head back and barked his happiness. This new world was his. He could travel through it, and he could feed himself on its bounty whenever he wanted. He was part of it all, free, but not alone. Pax hurried to where he'd buried the peanut butter jar and unearthed it. He carried it back and dropped it in front of Bristle and Runt, who were drowsing at the burrow entrance in the last rays of the afternoon sun. Both of them came alive instantly at the strange scent. Bristle was on her feet first. She nudged the jar and jumped back at its surprising roll. She sniffed it all around and tested it with her tongue. One taste was all it took. Bristle locked the jar between her paws and began lapping greedily, cleaning out the top half in seconds. She squirmed her snout in deeper. Pax had done this same thing. Be careful, you can get trapped. Too late. Bristle jumped up. She thrashed her head from side to side, but the jar was wedged on tightly. She hopped onto her hind legs, trying with both forepaws to claw it off, and tumbled over and over. Runt watched in amazement. His sister had never lost her composure before. Pax approached, offering to help, but Bristle dashed away. She would do this herself. Finally, she rolled onto her back and pried the jar off her face with her hind legs. She shook herself and stalked back, her head and tail high. She dropped down beside Pax and began cleaning herself. Bristle had never sat this close to him before, with her flank pressed comfortably against his own. Her scent had never been this friendly. A streak of brown on Bristle's white cheek caught his attention. Without thinking of the consequences, he stretched out and licked it off, and Bristle allowed it. Pax cleaned her ears and her throat and her muzzle, and after a moment, Bristle returned the care. Cheek to cheek, the two foxes groomed each other. Bristle stopped to sniff Pax deeply. "You don't smell of humans now." Pax didn't respond. He got to his feet to test the air. Something dangerous had entered the clearing with the dusk. An animal scent he didn't recognize but feared. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared, but Pax howled at Runt. "Get inside the den. Now." All right, we are going to read chapter 26 as well today. And now we are jumping back to Peter's perspective. Remember when we ended chapter 24 with Peter? He was just leaving Vola on the bus. "Kid." Peter twisted around so sharply he nearly fell over. He'd been certain the guard station was empty. He'd watched for 10 full minutes to make sure before leaving his cover. A soldier came out from behind a truck. He lifted his rifle butt to the sign chained over a barricade. "No entry." Peter straightened up as tall as he could on his crutches. It had been 2 days since he'd spoken to anyone. 2 days since the bus driver had said, "I don't know what you're really up to, son, but I doubt it's a good idea. You want, I can get you on a bus back tonight. No shame in that." And Peter had replied, "No thanks," because there would have been shame in turning back. And then the bus driver had said, "All right then, good luck," and let him out. Not a soul had spoken to him that night. The town was on the perimeter of the evacuated area, and the few people he passed cast their eyes down, picked up speed, as if they couldn't afford to make contact with anyone who might need help. Nothing extra here, their looks said. All is already lost. The next day, from sunrise to well past sunset, and most of this morning, he had traveled on roads through vacant towns, past abandoned schools and playgrounds and neighborhoods spookily silent without their squeaking tricycles, their car radios, their pickup ball games. The only familiar sound had been water running through garden hoses when he'd filled his thermos. He hadn't seen any other humans, but he'd seen the animals they'd left behind. A skittish pony tugging up grass in front of a church, dogs eyeing him balefully from behind dumpsters, dozens of skinny cats sliding away, their flanks hollow as spoons. "Hey, kid!" The soldier moved closer. He eyed Peter's handmade crutches, the rough cast, the dirty clothes. "We evacuated this area almost 2 weeks ago. Where have you been? You don't know that." "I know that, but I left someone down here. I'm going to get him." "Take it easy. We've checked the records. Everyone's out." "He's not a person." Peter jutted his chin, defying the soldier to argue that this mattered. Instead, the soldier's face changed, became somehow younger, and Peter saw that he wasn't that long out of high school. He slid his rifle back into its sling. "I have a dog. Henry." He didn't say anything else for a minute, just looked down the road as if he were hoping this dog of his would suddenly appear. Then he turned back inside. "I don't think anyone's walking him." My sister said she'd do it, but she works. Want to see his picture?" Even before Peter nodded, the soldier had drawn out his wallet. He held out a picture. A beagle. An ordinary beagle. Peter's throat hurt. The corners of the photo were worn soft and colorless. That picture had been taken out a lot. "That's Henry. I got him for my 8th birthday. His hips are bad now, but he still likes his walk, you know? Still likes to sniff out squirrels and stuff. I told my sister that, but Henry won't understand where I've gone, is the thing. He'll wait at the door all day for me. What's yours look like? I'll keep an eye out for him." "Pax isn't, Peter stopped. If it didn't matter that Pax wasn't a human, why should it matter that he wasn't a dog? He's red, black legs." "How big?" "Coyotes out here. They have pups this time of year. They'll take down a small dog when they have a litter to protect." "He's pretty small." Peter shifted his weight off his blistered palms. "Please, I've come a long way to do this." The soldier gazed at his photo another minute before slipping it into his wallet. When he looked back at Peter, he seemed older again. "We're holding them, but they're coming. You go in, you've got to be back out by tomorrow." He pointed at Peter's crutches. "You can do that?" "I can. So, you'll let me through?" The soldier looked around and leaned in. "This road is patrolled hourly, but we only guard the main trail entrances. No one is stationed in the woods yet. You travel 20 yards in, no one would stop you. But listen, if you get caught, I didn't just say that. Now get out of here." "Thanks." Peter turned and started for the woods before the soldier could change his mind. "Kid, I hope you find him." It was quiet in the woods, but here the quiet was right, and it was broken by the sound of wild things, which seemed a promise. Here, Peter could imagine seeing Pax's red brush flicking between the trees. Here, when he called, it was easy to imagine an answering bark. These things raised his spirits so much that he could almost ignore the pain in his palms and in his armpits, bleeding and raw. For an hour he pegged over ground that was so springy with decades of fallen pine needles, it seemed to lift him. When he heard the rough growl of a jeep, he ducked behind some brush until it passed. After that, he walked along the road's edge, sure that when another patrol went by, he'd have enough warning to take cover. And then he was there. It wasn't a landmark he recognized, or the way the road straightened out of its curve. It was the sense of betrayal that hung all around. He'd done something terrible here, and the place remembered. "Pax!" he called, not caring if anyone heard him. Let the jeeps come, let a whole army come. He wasn't leaving without his fox. "Pax!" Against his shouts, the silence grew only deeper. Ominous now, not promising. He started along the road again, calling and keeping his eyes to the gravel shoulder. He was sure Pax had had the toy soldier in his mouth when the car had peeled away. Whenever Pax had given up on Peter, he would have dropped it. Peter wanted to hold it in his hand again, a solid proof that his fox had been here. He walked a 1/4 mile, a 1/2 mile, eyes down, and then he stopped short. He wasn't going to find that toy soldier, because Pax wouldn't have given up. Not ever. Pax would never have thought he'd been abandoned. They were inseparable. Pax had known it all along. Peter was the one who'd had to learn it. If Pax wasn't here, he must have gone home to find Peter, or tried. Maybe the river would have blocked him, but maybe not. Dogs made it home against crazy odds all the time. Pax was 10 times smarter than any dog, so why wouldn't he be able to find his way? Maybe he was there right now. Home. Home was about 10 miles southeast of the old mill, and the mill was probably 4 or 5 miles south of where he was right now. So he'd head south, calling for Pax all the way. The gorge beside the mill would be too dangerous to navigate in the dark, so he'd sleep there, then make the descent at dawn. He would cross the river where it widened out at the mill, and then after another 10 miles of trails that he knew, he'd be home. "Hold on," he said out loud. "I'm coming." All right, otters, that's the end of our read aloud for today. I hope you enjoyed that last chapter and a half. Make sure you go back into Canvas to answer the couple of questions that I have posted there, and let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will be posting another read aloud for our virtual day on Friday. Have a great rest of your day.